Hello, my name is Marianne and I'm an alcoholic. I'd like to welcome you to Recovery in Action Life on Life's Terms. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. We're glad you're all here, especially newcomers. In keeping with our singleness of purpose and our third tradition, which states that the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking, we ask that all who participate confine their discussion to their problems with alcohol. This is an open big book step study meeting where we discuss the 12 steps of recovery as they're written in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous with the focus on their application in everyday life in recovery. This is the 7th session of the 5th cycle of the workshop that was presented on March 16th, 2024, where we completed steps 5 and 6 and began step 7. Next week, we'll continue with step 7. If you would like to contribute to the 7th tradition, you may do so using the QR codes displayed. Contributions are applied towards the group's expenses and support our service offices. Recordings of the workshop are available, and if you would like to be placed on the distribution list, please send an email to recoveryinaction462@gmail.com to receive the links. These links are unlisted and not public. I request that you not share them at the public level or post on any social media sites. The workshop typically begins with a brief meditation in which an inspirational music video is played. Because of copyright restrictions, it cannot be on the video. However, a link is provided, and I suggest you take a minute, view the video, and take a brief meditation for yourself before you begin the workshop. As the recording begins, the workshop is already in session. Feel free to contact me if you have any additional questions or require my assistance further. I hope you enjoy the workshop. Another custom of this group is to start the workshop by saying the full version of the Serenity Prayer. We're all familiar with the first part, but many of us are unaware that there is a second part to it, and I believe it's this second part of the prayer that reflects what recovery is all about. So if you would all please join me in the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as the pathway to peace, taking as he did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that he will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. Amen. So where we are starting is in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is the book of instructions on how to work the 12 steps. And the 12 steps, as we know, are a set of instructions on how to get rid of the things that are blocking us off from our higher power, how to get connected to God, and how to stay surrendered from alcohol, which is making our life unmanageable. So merely reading the big book without experiencing it is useless. You can't learn how to swim or play the piano or cook or live spiritually just by reading the book. You need to practice, practice, practice. In order to learn to swim, you've got to jump in the water. In order to play the piano, you've got to learn how to read music and then sit down at the keyboard and practice and practice and practice until you get better at it. So as we get into the big book, there's a lot of misconceptions. For many years, I read it and read it and read it and didn't really understand what it was saying. But the cover page of the big book states that this is the story of how thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. And it uses the term recovered, past tense. And for years, I got involved in that ongoing argument, which this particular statement completely disputes that. So there's a lot of misconceptions in our program, in meetings that we hear. And basically, the people who are saying those things are people who have not worked these steps. So if you haven't worked the steps, yeah, you haven't recovered, because the definition of recovered is that the problem is removed. I do not have to make a choice whether I drink alcohol or not, because I don't even think of it. I automatically turn to God instead of alcohol when I'm upset. It's no longer an option to solve my problems. Selfishness and self-centeredness are gone. I'm no longer angry, fearful, or harmful, because my old destructive ways of thinking and acting have been replaced by new and peaceful ones. And then when we look at the 10th step promise on page 84, there's lots of promises in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. There's not just the 9th step promises. This is the 10th step promise. And we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol, for by this time sanity will have returned. We will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. We react sanely and normally, and we will find that this has happened automatically. We'll see that our new attitude towards liquor has we will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That's the miracle of it. We're not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We've not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We are neither cocky nor are we afraid. That's our experience. That's how we react, so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. And then when we go to page 27 in the big book, it defines recovered as ideas, emotions, and attitudes which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. And additionally, in addition to that, in the appendix, in the spiritual experience, it gives a description of recovered as being a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifested itself among us in many different forms. And then in the foreword to the first edition, it states that we of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. It later goes on to say that the only requirement for membership is an honest desire to stop drinking. However, the desire to stop drinking is not the only requirement to becoming recovered. There's other things involved, such as being willing and actually doing everything that the big book says to do, which is in the first 164 pages, which are the instructions on how to become recovered, which starts with step 1. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable, and we have covered these. This is a brief review. So we went through activities for step 1, which basically hammers home that even knowing that I'm an alcoholic, as a real alcoholic, as self-knowledge only makes me realize that I cannot take one drink without being physically driven to take one drink after another. This then allows me the opportunity, if I'm spiritually fit, to pass on the first drink. And I can only do this on a continuous basis if I'm connected to my higher power. Then we covered step 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Then we were at step 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. Remember, it's step 3, it's just a decision. And we say the 3rd step prayer, where we offer ourselves to God. And then as we are saying this prayer then takes us to start doing the work that we need to do so that we can actually turn our will and our life over to the care of God, which it brings us to the fourth step, which is made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. In the fourth step, we have 4 actual inventories, an inventory for resentments, fears, and 2 inventories for the harms that we've done to other people, which has to do with our sex conduct and then everything else. And it brings us down to looking at ourselves. And in most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. On our grudge list, we set opposite each name our injuries. Was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal or sex relations that had been interfered with? And that looked at that identified these parts of self, which is our self-esteem, how we feel about ourselves, our pocketbook, our money and finances, our emotional security, safety, our ambitions, our plans for the future, and then our personal relationships, how we interact with others, both at a personal level, and then in our sex relationships. And what this boils down to is our character defects. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, or frightened? And that brings us to looking at these 5 main character defects. Where had I been selfish? Keeping what I have and wanting things done my way. Dishonest, lying, cheating, stealing, self-seeking, wanting more than I have right now. Frightened and inconsiderate of other people. And then we actually went into looking at breaking these character defects down even further, in looking at some of those other character defects. And we went through all 4 of the inventories, all 4 of the inventory forms, where we started to look at becoming the ideal self, which is on page 69 in the big book, where it states that whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow towards it. Put us to the ideal self. And we need to be willing to grow towards being that ideal self. So you were given a homework assignment that you should have had, where we talked about how do I want to be in my relationships? In each of the relationships that I've had, I'm looking at where have I been selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate? How have I hurt other people? How have I aroused jealousy, suspicion, bitterness? What do I need to do differently? So this was your homework assignment in prepping for the 5th step. And then the next part of the pre-5th step inventory is we did this with all of our inventories. So when we looked at each one of our resentments, we looked at the resentment and we read it forward. We looked at what we were resentful about, why we were resentful about this person, that it affected the parts of self. And then we looked at what was my part, what did I do, and then what character defects allowed me to do that. So here we are, we've got the famous Mr. Brown directly from the big book Resentment Inventory. Just remember, the only thing that is different in this is that the big book does not give us the information that was in column 4. I made that up. I took some artistic license here and just imagined what my part might have been. So here we are, and we read it down here. We read it forward. I'm mad at Mr. Brown because he pays a lot of attention to my wife. This affected my sex relationship.
I got the ball rolling by getting drunk after work and staying out all night. The character defects that allowed me to get drunk after work and stay out all night were I was selfish, I was frightened, I was inconsiderate, and I was jealous. So I've read it forward. This is it. I read it as a statement. Then what we do is we reverse that resentment. So what I did was I made an example. I took the form and I reversed it. I looked at the character defects first, what my part was, the part of self that was affected, what they did, and who they are. So, and basically, what I'm saying is if I was not selfish, frightened, inconsiderate, and jealous, here I am down here, I would have come straight home from after work, not gotten drunk and stayed out all night. Then my sex relations would not have been affected because Mr. Brown would not be paying attention to my wife. Therefore, it would have never happened. And this is getting us ready to sit down for that fifth step with our sponsor. And we just kind of read it out this way. And then we're basically just looking at the facts. There's no blame, shame, or guilt associated with it. It's nothing is good, bad, right, or wrong. It's just the facts. You take responsibility for getting the ball rolling for each resentment. And then you look at it, it was your character defects that allowed you to do those actions in column 4. And then when the rest of the steps are done, the resentment might go away after a short period of time. You're releasing that resentment. If after you reverse it, you're still upset with the person, you pray for that person every day in your morning prayers, and you're praying for God to give them a wonderful life. And it's important to remember that God will only do for us what we cannot do for ourselves. Column 4 of the fear and harms inventories lists the things that we're capable of doing. So if we look at column 4 and 5, this is your action plan. What footwork can I do? So I filled that out here, and it's the same with the harms inventory. This is my action plan for what I'm going to do better. Now we're at step 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. We've done all of this process on our own. Now we're ready to take these inventories to our sponsor and sit down and go through the a human being portion of the exact nature of our wrongs. Now, step 5 is done in different ways depending on the sponsor. And it's a good thing, however, to make sure that you work on any resentments that didn't ring true or make sense when you did that reversal, because you are doing the homework, you're doing the footwork. So you want to spend as much time as you need on the inventories before starting step 5, so that when it's started, it becomes something that is just facing facts. And when we get to step 5 on page 75 of the big book, it says, when we decide who is to hear our story, we waste no time. Now, to clarify here, the word story does not mean I was born on February 5th, 1950, and then I tell everything from that point forward. What it means is that this is my truth. My story is that my life sucked because I was mean-spirited, dishonest, jealous, judgmental, and lazy. I was a liar and a thief. And that's what my story is. So step 5 is not talking about your feelings. It's not a psychiatry session. It doesn't include a list of your good qualities. Step 5 is you looking for the things that are blocking you off from your higher power. And these things are your character defects. So when you do your fifth step, you will get together with your sponsor so you can admit the exact nature of your wrongs. And the exact nature of your wrongs are your character defects and every negative thing you ever said, thought, or did, and everything that caused you and those around you to be unhappy was a direct result of a character defect. So by telling your sponsor that you're dishonest, they'll know that you've cheated, stolen, or lied. They don't need to hear about each incident of you doing it, nor do they need to hear you express who you're mad at or what someone did to you. Some of you may be surprised that you will not tell the stories associated with what's on your inventories, nor will you discuss your reasons for being angry, so you can stop focusing on that. I'll assure you, your sponsor will get to hear these things that need to be heard in step 8 when you start getting ready to make your amends, since you're preparing for that. We're not there yet. We're only in step 5. So all you need to do for step 5 is read all your character defects out loud from column 5, from all 4 of your inventories. And as you do this, you'll realize that the same character defects keep showing up over and over and over again. So after reading your character defects, you tell your sponsor your deepest, darkest secrets, the things that you have thought, said, or done that have caused you to be embarrassed, ashamed, or guilty, the things that you don't want the world to know. This might include things you've never told your best friend or your spouse. Again, it's only about your behavior, not anyone else's. A reminder that your sponsor should be a safe place for you. You should be able to say anything you want without being judged or criticized. Anything discussed should not be repeated or discussed again with anyone else. You should feel as if you have the best sponsor in the entire program. There should be mutual trust and mutual respect without any fear or anger. If you don't feel this way about your sponsor, then I suggest getting a new sponsor. So it's important here to note that step 5 is done so you can see what's blocking you off from your higher power and causing your problems. The purpose of step 5 is to have the things blocking you off from your higher power revealed. So all of these things are blocking you off from your higher power. Okay, so the preparation is the key. And for step 6, the big book pretty much lays it out for us. And it basically says on page 75, returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour, carefully reviewing what we've done. We thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know him better. Taking this book down from our shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals, we ask if we have omitted anything, for we're building an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last. Is our work solid so far? Are the stones properly set in place? Have we skipped on the cement and put in have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? And it says to do exactly what the instructions say to do. There are very few time frames in the big book, and this is a very specific one. It specifies 1 hour. A good way to do this is to set the timer for 1 hour, and we all have timers on these little phones that we carry around. So set the timer for an hour. If you finish before the timer goes off, then maybe use the rest of the hour to pray, meditate, or think about things that you're grateful for. Just remember that it specifies 1 hour. The instructions for steps 4 and 5, which are the steps that deal with us, are now complete, and it's time to move to steps 6 and 7. Steps 6 and 7 are where a shift takes place. With 6 and 7, we start talking to God and looking to Him for His help. So this is where we're making that shift, because up until this particular point, we've been working on our own and working with our sponsor. Now we're going to step 6, which is we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And when we get to step 6, the next instruction is on page 76, which comes right after the questions to our work being solid. And it states, if we can answer to our satisfaction, we can then look at step 6. We've emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all of the things which we have admitted are objectionable? Can He now take them all, every one? If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. And sometimes people get a little confused with some of Bill's language here. And what he's talking about when he says the things which we have admitted are objectionable, he means our character defects. I was taught how to write the same way Bill was taught how to write, in that you don't use the same words over and over again. Therefore, you use other words that mean the same thing so that you don't look stupid. And Bill was very good at writing, and he was very good at using other terms. So when he's talking about the things which we have admitted are objectionable, he's talking about our character defects. So what we're going to be looking at next is in our workbooks, there is, let me find mine, in the workbook that you can download on page 149 and 150. Find it here. 149 and look at me, I have a little tag on it here. On pages 149 and 150, there is what's called the defect asset table. And when we start looking at our defects, we use the defect asset table to take the character defects that we listed in column 5 of all 4 of our inventories, and we transfer those character defects to the column here on the left, this left-hand column where it says all of our character defects we will list on here. And there are additional copies of this form if you need it, or if you need to use a separate sheet of paper, that's fine too. But you want to list all of the character defects that came up in your inventories and use the left side of the table. If any character defect is listed more than once, you only have to write it once. But so for now, you want to ignore the right column over here. You want to ignore that one and only look at the left-hand column. The column on the right will be addressing in step 7. So all you have to do at this point is write your character defects, which you'll note here, I only listed one here as an example, character defect of being a procrastinator. So that's all we have to do with this, with the book or the handout is use the left side here where you would list your character defects. So what you're doing is you're getting ready to be someone that you've never been before. As someone without your character defects, you're going to be a lot better than who you were with them. So now the main question in step 6 is, now that I've seen that it's my character defects causing all of my problems, do I want them removed? That's how simple it is in step 6. Do I want all these character defects that I've listed, everything from my inventories, do I want them removed? And therefore, you go over your list and this list of character defects that you just wrote, do you want them removed? Hopefully, your answer is yes. If not, then you have to go into prayer and pray for the willingness. This is where we have to ask God for the willingness. And if you can't, Bill Wilson talks about that in the 12 and 12, that some of our character defects we don't want to let go of because we love them too much. So we're not ready for that yet. A guy who's also known as a saint, Augustine, he made a comment one time where he was asking God to remove some of these types of character defects. And he said, "Dear God, please give me chastity, just not yet." But again, we have to ask ourselves, are there any of these character defects that we're still holding on to? And they probably won't all be removed at once. But we have to have that willingness. The step says we have to be we have to be entirely ready to have God remove them. So what do we need to do in order to be entirely ready that's when we really have to fall back on our relationship with our higher power, our God, so that we actually, it's one of the reasons why we typically will ask someone, are you done? Are you done yet? Because if they're not done yet, they're not entirely ready to have them removed. So we have to be entirely ready.
Thank you so much for your participation. I hope you enjoyed the workshop, and if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. And now, please join me in our closing prayer, which is St. Faustina's prayer for mercy. Eternal God, in whom mercy is endless and the treasury of compassion inexhaustible, look kindly upon us and increase your mercy in us, that in difficult moments we might not despair nor become despondent, but with great confidence submit ourselves to your holy will, which is love and mercy itself. Amen.